Read Me, Part 9. The Magician. I sat looking out my window as the rain fell. It seemed like it was always raining these days. I curled inside my blankets and fell asleep. I had strange dreams. It was honestly more impressive that I had any dreams at all. I had not recalled a dream for years. Only, I would have been fine without remembering these dreams. I dreamt of a vampire taking me by the neck. Just as he was about to put his teeth inside my vein, I woke in a horrifying sweat. I took off my pajama top and tossed it to the ground. It was drenched in sweat. I stood up and shuffled to the bathroom, disoriented and dizzy. I turned on the bathroom light and looked into the mirror. I was having trouble seeing well, so I threw cold water upon my face. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror. "You old goat," I said to myself. Then, from the corner of my eyes, I saw him. There was a shadow in my bedroom, standing in the corner. I could feel its eyes on me, and I felt myself trembling. Who's there?" I asked. There was no response from it. It only came closer to the edge of the bed, towards the door of my bathroom. I saw a figure with a cape suddenly emerge into the light. All I could see were two shining amber eyes, and then with a quick flick of its finger, he wrapped the cape around his body, and he disappeared. I stood in awe, although I'm not entirely sure why. After all, after everything I've seen these last few weeks. Come on. I looked at my room, turning on the light, and I looked at the clock. It was just after midnight. I had only been asleep a little over an hour. I crawled inside my bed, trying to forget the figure. Then I heard it. Music was coming from my parlor. It sounded like circus music, and I wrapped my pillow around my head until it got louder. Finally, I could take it no more. I grabbed my glasses off my bedstand. Putting them on, I walked downstairs, grabbing my robe as I went. I rushed downstairs, expecting to find some teenagers partying outside my window. Only, it was coming from the bookcase where I housed that Read Me book. I should have known by now. I was usually okay with it, but right now I wanted nothing more than to sleep. I was on the mood to read stories and rescue sorry souls, create magic, or, as I had the thought, that's when I saw it. My entire parlor turned into a circus tent. I could see animals with dresses on, people in their best dressed attire. There was a man on stilts. There was a dancing ballerina, a man running as he breathed fire at the crowds. In the corner was a fortune teller and a bearded lady. I looked at the sign, and it said, Whitman and Briarton Circus. I smiled a bit. It had been such a long time since I had seen a real circus. With all the animal rights activists shutting down the circus in most towns, it was kind of fun to relive a living memory, even if for a second. This is what it had to be. I had not seen the Whitman and Briarton Circus Act in over 50 years. I was a small child the last time I had seen the circus. I could smell the popcorn, see the clowns dancing, and for a second, I stood up ready to walk the long corridors of the tent set up so I could join the patrons. Only, the images seemed to move away from me when I stepped closer to them. It was that, an illusion. I saw it float by me, turning its crispy pages in mid-air, waiting on me to grab onto it. I took the book, and it fell into me hard and heavy. Fine, you win, I said. The Magician. I looked at the pages of the book, and they seemed to grow before me. The pages spread out like a giant cape. They wrapped themselves around me. They seemed to grow in size until I could barely breathe. That is when I heard a loud popping of a gun going off. I could smell the smoke, and then I saw it. "You see here?" said a tall, thin man. "This is no ordinary rabbit." He held up the rabbit. Then I saw him look at me. For the first time, one of the characters in the book looked at me. "Hello, Robert." I took a deep breath. "Won't you step out of your world and into ours? I think you will enjoy the story more if you join us." I smiled, and as I walked towards him, I found a seat and sat down in front of him. He turned his attention from me and towards the crowd of people dressed in clothing from another time. He seemed to forget me now, and escaped back into what he was doing, in another time and place. I watched on as the crowd cheered when he presented a white handkerchief in place of the rabbit, putting the handkerchief back in his upside-down hat, and then pulled out the white rabbit again. I smiled to myself. I looked around the small tent and noticed a man standing towards the back of the crowd. I kept watching him, expecting him to do something. Instead, he did nothing but kept a sinister gaze on our friendly magician. The magician noticed the man and abruptly ended his show. "Well, that's all for now. Well, you head on over to the main tent where we'll see the acrobatic splendor of the tigers." The crowd got up, and the magician led them out of the tent as he held his hat upside down, and they put coins inside of it as they left. When they were gone, the sinister-looking man came out of the shadows. "Vincent, you have much to learn." "Oh, I saw you catch the end of the show. Did you like it?" "Child's play. Look, I did all the tricks you taught me back in Germany." "You should have grown by now. You're nothing more than a sideshow act. I've seen all I came to see." The young magician pleaded with the older man as I watched on. "Please, Mr. Gibbons, can't I show you some of the other tricks I found?" "If you must. But I'm leaving to go back to my hotel. I'm tired now. I'll be back tomorrow evening." "I wasn't this bad always," said the young man to his white rabbit, who sat in its cage eating grasses. A cold gust of wind blew into the tent and nearly knocked over the chairs. I could feel its chill. And then I saw her in the doorway. "I think you most certainly can. Exactly what I've been looking for on this chilly night," she said, with a slight accent. The young magician looked upon her bewildered and yet mesmerized. The woman whose beauty matched no woman before or after stepped inside the tent and looked at the young man, and then he, without thinking, took her pale hand. She looked at him, doe-eyed. "My name is Amalie. What is yours?" "Vincent." "Perfect," she said, and kissed his cheek. In a strange fit of frenzy, he kissed her so hard on the mouth. She smiled and then kissed him back, nearly taking off her clothes right there. I felt odd watching, as though I were a voyeur. Then I saw her face change. Her eyes became serpent-like, and her mouth doubled open, and she sunk 2 layers of teeth into his neck. The young man screamed, and yet the euphoria he felt kept him from running away. Instead, he accepted all that she was taking from him. "You're no lady," he whispered to her. "No, I'm not. I am your salvation." And then she sunk her teeth inside of his neck again. The pages that had wrapped themselves around me so warmly now opened back up and shrunk to their average size. I was holding the book in my hand when I looked down at the book. Words fell before me now, in Vincent's own words. It was a night when I met Countess Amelie. I had forgotten what she had done, and I had forgotten what took place that very first night we met. But from that moment on, she was at my side. She never left me. I had known Mr. Dobbins most of my life. He had taken me in when I was a child after my parents died in the war. He was our neighbor then, a funny older man that worked as a magician. Germans had killed his wife and children during the war, so he was never quite the same. He took me in, saving my life, teaching me everything that I knew. He could be a harsh critic. I have my life to thank for, though. I didn't like giving up on my dreams, so I worked very hard as a magician. I strived to create new acts to hold the interest of anyone that would watch me. Mr. Dobbins remained unimpressed, and then I met Countess Amelie, and that changed everything. Mr. Dobbins had come back the very first evening, just as he'd promised, and this time Amelie met him at the tent opening. "You must be Mr. Dobbins." "Yes, what is it to you?" "I'm Vincent's pretty helper for the evening." "Oh, well, let us get on with it then." Amelie walked over to me and took my hand. "Tonight we shall levitate." "What? Never done that before." "Watch and learn. Just say abracadabra, and I'll float all on my own." She smiled at me, kissing my cheek. I did as told, and the crowd, now sitting before me, watched on in amazement. Mr. Dobbins, my teacher, watched on as well, expecting failure. "Ladies and gentlemen, won't you meet the amazing Amelie? She will be my helper tonight, and she has many extraordinary talents. Did you know she could fly?" I asked the crowd, and Amelie smiled onward, bowing demurely. Mr. Dobbins crossed his arms and stood back with a look of pure disgust and disdain. However, I didn't let it deter me, and I set up the blocks, but Amelie told me to just say the words. Well, abracadabra! In one motion, Amelie did a somersault in mid-air. She stayed up in the air and then began to float. She floated up higher, and then flew over the crowd of people who screamed in excitement. She floated back down slowly onto the stage, and I took her hand, and we stood there, bowing. It was magnificent. I don't know how she was able to do it. When the show was over, Mr. Dobbins came over to me, beaming. "Vincent, I am so proud of you. However did you do it?" "A true magician never gives up his secrets," Amelie spoke to Mr. Dobbins, situating herself in front of me. "Ah, yes, very true. I'm sorry, old boy, but won't you let me take you to dinner at the hotel I'm staying at?" "Oh, I'd like that very much," I said. "Amelie, you must join us," said Mr. Dobbins. "I couldn't. I'm on my very own special diet that keeps my figure. You know what you see here. You two go and enjoy yourselves." She kissed my cheek. When we left and were in Mr. Dobbins' car, we drove off to the city. The lights were delightful, and I was happy to be in his presence. He had grown so much like a father to me over the years. "Tell me, Vincent, how did you and Amelie meet?" I couldn't recall. For once in my life, I tried and could not remember how we had met. "Oh, you know, circus life. You meet a lot of people." "Oh, yes, I suppose. Ah, here we are," he said, pulling into the parking lot of the Grand Hotel. He had a valet park his car, and we went inside to the main restaurant. We were sitting down, and Mr. Dobbins couldn't seem to take the smile off of his face. I'm so proud of you. I was worried for a while about how you'd turn out after the war. Your parents meant so much to me. You mean so much to me. I know that. I'm thankful for all you've done for me. Truly I am. Although I have to say, working in the circus isn't my ideal job. I hope I can have my own show in Vegas. Just as soon as Amelie and I make enough money, we're out of here. Mr. Dobbins had tears in his eyes, and I ordered us some ale. He patted me on the back. Later that night, when I got back to my trailer, Amelie was missing. She'd been with me for weeks, and yet tonight, she was gone. Where had she gone off to? Shortly after midnight, a figure appeared over my head. I turned on the light next to my bed, and there stood Amelie, with a severe expression on her face. She was looking at me, but not in my eyes. She was staring at my neck. Amelie, are you all right? She seemed to snap out of it, and a small grin fell over her face. I noticed her white blouse and jeans had blood on them, but she didn't say anything. She just crawled inside the bed next to me. The following morning, I busied myself helping out some of the other circus workers while Amelie slept. I couldn't help but wonder about Amelie. She was beautiful in every way, perfect even. She seemed to love me, and honestly, I couldn't recall when I had never loved her. But she was a stranger to me. Amelie and I were going to be successful, and people from far and wide came to see our show, expecting to see the levitating woman. Mr. Dobbins stuck around, offering his authority and trying to manage us. Amelie was having none of it. She used her charms to persuade Mr. Dobbins to stay out of our way. One evening, Amelie was ill. She claimed she could not go on that night. I kept pressing her to drink soda, but she claimed she was too sick. Her face was pale, and it worried me. I was afraid that all the money we had made and sold tickets would have to be given back. What can I do? I asked her. Come closer, my dearest, she said, and then I felt her kiss my neck. Amelie then opened her mouth and lashed onto my neck with razor-sharp teeth. I screamed, and as I did, my friend Mr. Dobbins rushed in, finding us in this position. Without thinking, he pulled me away, grabbing a knife from my kitchen. Stay away from him, Mr. Dobbins warned her. I was bleeding, but her pale face seemed to be getting its color back. What do you know of him? You're a demon. I have taken care of Vincent his entire life. You're using him. Did you tell him what you were planning on doing? I watched on as her yellow eyes and fangs seemed to encapsulate her very existence. Her beautiful face was gone now. She looked like a snake as she crept towards Mr. Dobbins. I looked at him, wondering what he had been up to. I'm only looking out for his best interest, which is more than I can say for you. I want you out of here immediately. What of the circus? Didn't they pay you to keep Vincent here for another 3 years? I looked at Mr. Dobbins. I felt betrayed. He knew I wished to leave the circus. How could he? I looked at Amelie, who I no longer recognized. I felt betrayed on all accounts. Then I saw Mr. Dobbins strike her. I attacked him back, trying to pull him off of her. It was too late. He had already shoved the knife inside of her heart. What did you do that for? Son, she's a vampire. She was going to kill you. No, she wasn't. I knew that without a shadow of a doubt that she loved me. The person didn't seem to love me any longer was Mr. Dobbins. He had grown selfish in his care of me. It wasn't about love, but now it was about money that drove him. I saw hatred and jealousy in his eyes now. I could do nothing except run from the tent and run from Mr. Dobbins and my lover, Amelie. I felt like I had no one left in this world. It had been taken from me. I ran all night. I ran into the woods, and I camped out for days. It was about the third night I began to feel strangely ill. I had no idea what had come over me, and I craved raw meat, and I craved blood. Had she turned me? I now knew I had become a creature of the night. I went back into town, went back to my trailer at the circus. Mr. Dobbins was there, waiting on me still. Vincent, please let me explain. I do not need to hear from you. I already know what you will say. I wish never to see you again. Vincent, please, go! I screamed, and as I did, my mouth felt strange. I could feel the teeth inside it, and I could see his heart under his skin. I didn't want to kill him, but his blood was thick, and the smell was sweet like candy. Mr. Dobbins backed away in fear. He ran off towards his car, and that was the last time I ever saw him. I made amends with Amelie in my own way. Her gift to me was everlasting life. I found my way to Vegas after all. I was a one-person act able to levitate all on my own. I had learned the hard way that money isn't everything. I also learned that with money comes enemies, and eventually I found I had many. It was not long before another vampire faction found out I was showing the world my secrets. Something that goes against the very pack mentality, and I was taken and murdered in the night. My soul never rests now. I only see the fury my spirit has for others, except Amelie. I loved her, I truly did. I treasure the times I had with her, and someday I hope we meet again. I looked at the book, and it began to shake beneath my hands. I sat it on the table in front of my parlor and watched it. What gifts would it bestow now to me? I stood up when I didn't see anything else happening, and I happened to catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked 10 years younger. Had the vampire gifted me my youth? I laughed heartedly and inwardly thanked Vincent. I was sorry for what had happened to him and Amelie. I walked upstairs to my room, and I fell into my bed.